Hi, everyone. Are we here? Are we here? Fantastic. Okay. Can someone drop something in the chat just so that I know I'm not like yelling into a vacuum here? I will first. Hello. Hello from Queens. Yay. Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Appreciate that. Even though I know it's you. Okay, everyone. So what we're going to go through today is evaluating hi, Sakshi. Nice to see you. We're going to go through evaluating a nonlinear career path. Why is this important right now? Well, we all know the world is in flux right now. There are a lot of different roles, different opportunities. Hey, April. Hi from Kentucky. Yay. Oh, Maxim. Good evening. Nice to see you all. All right, well, let's get started here, shall we? What I would love to cover today is just a quick look at what the next 20 minutes are going to look like. So what we're going to start with an intro. Who am I? Why am I here? Why am I talking to you about this? We're actually going to go through a career evaluation framework. So just a way for you guys to think about how do I make my next move? What should I look for? How do I stretch myself? How do I grow? Hey, Jason. Hey, Maxim. Nice to see you guys. As a nonlinear generalist, I love that. We're going to go through then, if we figured out the moves we want to take, then what side of how do we go through from a candidate perspective, from an interview, what should we look for? And then we're going to flip to the other side of the table and say, if someone is coming from a nonlinear background, how should we think about interviewing them? So with that, who am I? Well, hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany. It's nice to meet you. I am currently the head of sales at HireGuide, which is a very fast-growing tech startup out of Silicon Valley, but I currently am based in Toronto. But well before that, I left Indiana University with a degree in costume design, which is exceptionally marketable, let me tell you. And I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grow up. And so this led me through a vacillating path, if you will, into product placement. I worked in advertising. I worked in film. Hey, Jean-Pierre, nice to see you. I worked in film. I sold films, so I worked on both sides. I was an entrepreneur. I migrated into tech sales, and now I'm at an HR tech startup. And on top of all that professional stuff, I am a wife, I am a mom, I'm a friend, I'm a runner, I'm a yogi. Like to say I'm a general life lover, but you can see it's been exceptionally different, if you will, especially coming out with a degree in costume design. So how did I do that? What did I do? And what's the framework I'm going to share with you today? Well, my goal is hopefully when we're done this, I'm going to leave you with some tools for you to actually walk through this. So going forward, what is this? Has anyone ever done a jigsaw puzzle? Normally you find them at like cottage, cabins, maybe you're renting, perhaps your grandmother has one, you do them with friends or family. Yes, Texas has entered the chat, thank you. Yes, someone's done a jigsaw puzzle, just even like okay, there we go. Any sort of like emoticon, yeah? I'm gonna go with yes, okay. So normally you pull these out on a rainy day, great. Most often, though, you prop up the box, right? And you start building. And thank you, April. We all love a good puzzle night. So you start and you generally have the box up. Great. So I know what this looks like. Amazing. Then I build the perimeter. This is how all of us have kind of been taught to build puzzles, right? So we build the perimeter. Amazing. And then we start to fill in the gaps. So we start to fill in a section over here. And then sometimes we go, oh, and we find some other pieces and we fill in a section over here. And eventually they kind of meet in the middle. But ultimately we have this box that we're looking at. So we understand what the picture is supposed to be. Now, I like to think of your career really like this. But I like to think of it like this without the picture on the box. So ultimately, you're kind of just building this puzzle, but you don't really know what the final picture looks like. So you're gathering experiences over here in pieces and you're putting them together. And then sometimes you make some big jump to the other side of the puzzle and you start building those pieces. And then eventually something meets in the middle, but you still don't quite know what this picture looks like. So knowing that, this is the incredible, simple framework I have used to develop your career. Now, any person who has a degree or has been in the same role for a long time and you know what you want to do, frankly, you're probably not even attending this chat anyway. You probably saw the title of this and said, I'm good. For those of you like me, though, who have a lot of different interests, who are looking for different opportunities, this is my super nonlinear framework. I like to take what I'm good at. So in the beginning, when you're assessing anything, you go, what am I good at? And these can be things you are organically good at. And then what do I like? And those two things, those two simple things should make up your current job. And you can be good at a number of things. I mean, personally, I was really good at talking to people. I was exceptionally organized, and turns out that worked out really well for me in customer success. So I ended up in customer success in my first few roles. And as I kept learning and learning what I liked, I kept learning about these jobs. I mean, part of stepping into a new role is you don't even know what you don't know. And so part of it is really trying to identify what am I good at and what do I like, and ultimately amassing new skills and figuring out what you like. That's really the goal of those first few experiences and those first few jobs. But eventually you keep going and you decide that you want to try something new. Well, once it's time to make a move, how do you decide how to make a move? Another super, super simple framework that has boded me exceptionally well over 20 years is taking your current job and taking out what you don't like. So there's always going to be pieces you don't like. But then adding in, what do I want to learn? And how do you figure out what you want to learn? Well, you figure out what you want to learn by ultimately maybe shadowing someone, seeing another project, looking at someone in a different department, seeing something someone did on LinkedIn and going, wow, that looks really exciting. That's something I would like to learn. And that is really where you should look for that next job, on the cusp of what I've done minus what I don't like, ideally with something I want to learn. This should propel you into your next role. However, in order to do that, part of what's helpful about that is I'm sure many of you, especially being on LinkedIn, have seen this. Do you have 20 years of experience or 1 year repeated 20 times? So this is something that's going around LinkedIn right now. And it's a trap that a lot of people fall into, because if you never assess what you don't like, and if you never assess what you want to learn, you continue to move into different jobs, and that's great. But ultimately, you keep repeating the same job and the same experience. So when it comes 10 years down the line, you haven't necessarily amassed new skills or new experiences. You've ultimately just continued to refine what you're good at, which is great. But how on earth do you stay competitive? So you stay competitive again by going through my current job, what I don't like, what I want to learn. But I know some of you are probably thinking, well, if what I want to learn is ultimately something I don't know, well, then it's a little bit scary, right? It's outside of my comfort zone. And this is where we get into this. So I'm sure some of you have seen this, but this is a well-documented psychological discourse called leaving one's comfort zone. We all know how the comfort zone feels, right? It feels good, it feels comfortable. But in order to get out of the comfort zone, you actually have to go through fear. And this is something that's really scary. I mean, it's called fear, right? So when you pass through fear, though, that's when you can get to the learning zone. And that's really where you can accelerate. So in order to grow, we have to pass through fear in order to learn. And ask anyone who you admire if they have been scared before, if they have been challenged before, they will tell you yes more times than not. You have to go through fear in order to get to learning, in order to get to growth. So how do you do that? Well, this is really what we're looking at and what we'll talk about next. There you go. Yeah, Jean-Pierre, you're exactly right. Do you have experience or just tenure? And in order to get experience, you got to get a little uncomfortable and a little bit scared. So this is, again, just a good recap of your career really is a puzzle, and you just don't have the end picture. You get a new job, you have the job, you learn what you like, you figure out what you don't like. Great. Then you look for that new job with what you like and what you want to learn. Then, oh my gosh, you get that job. It's amazing. And of course, it's terrifying because ideally you've done something or you're in an environment where you don't necessarily have that experience right now, but you certainly have the skill. So let's talk now about interview positioning. And how are we going to actually walk through what and how to let people know that we have this skill or we have this elasticity in us? We just need a chance. So, candidate interview positioning. Woohoo, very exciting stuff. So what we'll do here is I want to walk through why now. So the good news is it used to be such that you had to have experience in a certain field or department or role before they would hire you. But we actually are on the precipice of something really exciting, which is skills-based hiring. So if we flip to the other side of the table, the candidate side of the table, how do we educate around skills and why? Well, there's three macros going on right now that are really calling people to skills-based hiring. There's social pressure, there's legal pressure, and there's economic. So social, of course, are all the social justice movements that have happened. So companies are really trying to ultimately hire more fair and more equitably and more diverse. There's legal pressures. Grievance cases in hiring are actually up 20% year over year. So people are looking to interview in a more equitable manner that they can prove. And finally, there's economic pressure. I mean, there's massive shifts in the generation of workforce right now. And so with those huge shifts in the workforce, people, I'm hearing a lot talking to talent leaders, people say, I know this is coming and I'm really nervous and I'm not necessarily sure what to look for. And the answer, of course, is skills, which is great. So what that brings us to is, what is this? And again, I'll leave this with you, but ultimately skills-based hiring is just the building blocks of the labor market. It's looking at your skills and confirming that experience and pedigree are not necessarily what you need at this point. You need to have the skills and the learning agility, because let's be honest, even some of the skills we're looking at today were not things that we had to even think about 5 to 7 years ago. So with that, I want to talk about interview positioning. So interview positioning is really figuring out, how do we talk about some key stories in our repertoire? Well, there you go, April. You leave your corporate and become your own boss and consultant. Exactly. So the goal of interview positioning is, if you evaluated what you like, then you should have examples of that, right? Now, write those down. If you've confirmed what you want to learn, you've likely come across that, because you didn't just pull something out of thin air of what you wanted to learn. Ultimately, you learned, or you saw what you wanted to learn by seeing periphery projects, being exposed in current roles. I want you to write that down. The goal of what we're doing here is interview positioning, and we want to leave with a series of stories that we can ultimately leverage for anything that's asked of us, so we look ready to go. And how we want to make sure that we're in the framework of CAR, which is context, action, and result. So I'm going to give you an example here. This is a real story. So I inherited a team, and the previous manager said I needed to pip some current reps to be successful, one specifically. I pushed back and I said I didn't agree. I needed to assess first. So I assessed. I confirmed a plan. We figured out what their gifts were, what their struggles were, and we developed a plan to improve. That rep actually went on to be one of the top performing reps. They achieved 150% to quota multiple times. They went to club, they got promoted, all the things you want. And I have that story in my repertoire. But if I'm asked different questions, I can ultimately pivot it back accordingly. So if you see here, tell me about a time when you had to performance manage a rep. What actions did you take and what was the outcome? Well, easy. This story is laid up for that, right? Context, I inherited a team, action, result, they went on to be a stellar performer. So that's the easy question, right? Well, then what happens when we go, give me an example where you made an impact in your previous role? How did you know you made an impact? Quantify the impact. Well, in this instance, I can talk about this as well, but I can talk about, well, I believe the impact really is in the people, which I do believe. So I had an example once where I had a challenging situation, and I can kind of back into this story. The last thing I want to do is, what's your management style? How do you define leadership versus management? I can talk about leadership is really setting a vision, management is tactically executing. An example I'll give you of leadership and management is this. I can go through the story and then I can say leadership was observed by not necessarily doing exactly what the previous person said, really investing in coaching and development, and ultimately then growing my team. Management was the tactical execution of that. So it's applicable for all things, but ultimately what I'm doing is really just codifying a couple stories, maybe 5 to 7 stories that you can back in to any question. And the way you're going to do that is ultimately, if you're looking at a role, looking at those job descriptions and those skills, and really pulling out some key stories and examples where you can back this in. So with that, we know our career is a puzzle. We know we don't know the full picture. We're going to refine our job search by what we like minus what we don't like plus what we want to learn. And we're going to build 5 to 10 CAR stories to leverage during an interview. So what happens now when you move to the other side of the table and you're hiring? So now if you're hiring people that don't necessarily have the experience or the pedigree or the connection of the person you're looking for, how do you assess this person? Well, this is really where we get into this, which is skills-based hiring. So why now? Just a little bit of data so that you have this in your back pocket, especially those of you on the other side of the table right now who are interviewing people. But skills-based hiring actually adds up to 20 times more workers. It increases those people without a degree by 9%. It increases the population of women by 24%. And you can see here the increase in the talent pool for all generations. Gen X, 8.5, 9X for millennial, 10X for Gen Z. So it really is something that many organizations are embracing right now, because if you do have a nonlinear career path, then ultimately you are going to have to assess on skill. It's just how you are going to have to figure out if this person is the right fit for your organization. So how are people doing this? Well, the way that many leaders are ultimately implementing skills-based hiring right now is they are aligning on what good looks like upfront. So upfront, they are codifying what are the skills that I want for this role from this person. They are then confirming what are the questions I need to ask and what are the answers I need to look for from this person. What's really helpful is then they're measuring against the question, not against other people. So this is really truly where you can start to evaluate based on skill and not your talent pool, which will be a moving target depending on who you're interviewing and the group you're interviewing. So you want to ask the same questions every time and look for the same answers and score against those. And finally, you want to have a scorecard to ultimately choose based on data and scoring, not on gut. Because gut is really where bias seeps in, and gut is really where we unfortunately step away from skills-based hiring. And this is where, as I said, bias, likability, relatability ultimately do seep in. So knowing all of that, the recap really is our career is a puzzle. We don't know the full picture, and that's okay. But we want to refine our job search with what we like, plus what we don't like, minus what we don't like, plus what we want to learn. Simple formula. We want 5 to 10 car stories, context, action, results to leverage during interviews. And once you're on the other side, you want to leverage skills-based hiring to really evaluate that nonlinear journey. So the career, again, it's always going to be a puzzle, and you do not have the box with the full picture, and that's fine. But ultimately, what you do need to do then is just embrace the build, continue to jump, and continue to learn. And that's it, everyone. Ooh, I did it with a minute left. I was so worried about time. Does anybody have any questions for me at this point? Feel free to drop them in the chat if you do. All right. Well, with that, I will say thank you so much for coming. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like. I love to chat about this stuff and ultimately how to pivot careers, how to think about careers differently, to assess based on skill. Sakshi, yes, I certainly do. My company that I work for, HireGuide, does this, but I did not want this to be a plug. But no, ultimately, HireGuide is a tool that assesses based on skill. So it builds skills-based hiring guides. And ultimately allows you to assess based on skill. Jean-Paul, yeah, it's a good question. Jean-Pierre, think about it. We've all been, so Jean-Pierre's question, everyone, was really about why are companies reluctant to pursue nonlinear candidates? And it really comes down to the fact that we've all hired the same way for so long, and people don't like to change. Nobody likes to change. And so people believe, because hiring is such a personal decision, that people know what they're doing. People are very reluctant to admit they made a bad hire or they should have hired someone else. And that's really challenging. And so ultimately, people are challenged to look at it. It comes down to, Jean-Pierre, just bias and the way we've done things before. But ultimately, we are at an inflection point, which is really exciting, where there is a huge generational shift happening in the workforce. And then there is just a confluence of social and legal and economic issues that are really kind of forcing companies' hands into this, which is exciting. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It was nice to see you. And again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Bye, everyone. Oh, Susanna Williams, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. We can chat about this. I'm over time now. All right, thanks.